I have a confession to make, but first, I would like you to make a little confession with me, and I hope that's okay with you. I can see people joining in. A quick show of hands, and I'm making a friendly disclaimer that I'm going to keep doing this a few times because it's post-lunch, and I know it's an amazing meal that we had. All right, back to the business. A quick show of hands if you have ever been in a knee-deep situation, working on test automation, making sure it not just works, but also make sure it's readable, clean, and maintainable. All right, just hold the hands up still. And for those of you who raise the hands, or for others, you could please keep the hands up if you loved reading your colleague's code. Let me repeat this for others as well who are just joining in. How many of you love reading other people's code? Interesting. I expected this, so it's not quite efficient. All right. A quick show of hands again. You don't have to actually, but this is just more like a food for thought, getting warmed up for the session. Is your test automation prepared for major application changes without extensive rework? When did you last review your test code or duplications and inefficiencies? Does your testing practices contribute to code cleanliness or add complexity? Have out-of-date tests caused false results? Getting in there? Yeah? Cool. How intimidating these are? You can ask, Manoj, just after lunch, second day of the conference, why do you make us feel guilty? I've never thought about this. I just finished my test cases, automated. You know, how many of you are following Agile? Most of you. And how many of you have automation as part of your definition of done? Okay, that's where it's exciting. Thank you, everyone, for joining here. But that's not my confession. My confession is this, right? I've been using test automation, practicing, preaching people, teaching them to not just develop test automation scripts, also make sure to transform them into art. I mean, there's been a common misconception about why you do this, right? So it's constantly changing in this world where we have to adapt and staying relevant. And I'm here to change that perspective, that narrative, and I wanted to share my experience. And also my confession is that this is not a summary of the How Clean Code book by Robert Martin, so you could relax. I know you could go and read that book yourselves. This is not just that. This is my experience working with different teams. I've been consultant all my life, working in test automation, so this is just a summary of it. And you will be hearing a little more of experiences from that. Now, I've split this into 4 parts. Honestly, this talk, again, this is another confession. This is a 60-minute version of my talk. Unfortunately, Hustav just has 20-minute version. So I had to trim down quite a few of it, but I hopefully do justice to a few of them. I'm going to deep dive on test authoring a little bit, because once you follow that, all the other phases makes it a little bit easier. Let's jump into test authoring where the foundation is created. The couple of strategies that I'm going to talk about is descriptive and meaningful test case names, especially the single responsibility principles, small functions, modularizations, fast feedback loops, the campsite rule, using TDD. How many of you have heard these terms before? Okay, a few. Great. Okay, let's double click on descriptive and meaningful test case names, right? So I wanted to, this is like more the first impression of anyone seeing your code, right? Having descriptive meaning. So if someone walks up to me and asks me, hey, who are you? I can't just say that I'm a random brown person from Indian origin living in Australia, right? The same with you. Or how about we don't have the naming concept itself, like, oh, you're Hungarian 1, Hungarian 2, or probably different nationalities, or how does it sound like if people call you by your national ID, right? That doesn't just work. It's just like binaries. So 2 things here. One is Swiss Army knife, and other was a specialized tool set. So make sure you have human readable titles where you develop any functions or any cases that just works for a specific purpose. Don't, multiply it with multiple things just for your convenience and make it not reusable and user-friendly for others. Be unique, be concise, and class should only have one reason to change. Right? That's very, very important. And this piece of code that you write for any test script is actually a comprehensive documentation of your entire product. If you think through that angle, the code that you're going to write will really, really make life easy for anyone. And small functions and modularizations, this is my favorite thing whenever I run these sessions. Think of a Lego. How many? I'm sure most of you would Lego, so I don't want to ask that show your hands. I'm sure the whole the room will be up. Small functions and modularizations, so think of a monolith and modular, and this is how your code should be. I'm sure most of you have seen any automation code, be it Selenium, Appium, Cypress, Playwright, all this. You can have your happy path increment flow in one big class, or you could split it across, have your own strategy and do it, right? And you should promote writing short, focused functions and modularizing tests. And I'm sure Richard Bradshaw is up here, who will be doing the keynote and still preparing his slides. You're done? Right, thanks. So he usually runs a Lego automation workshop, which sorts of help you look at the big picture and then drill down and think it of as a Lego solving a puzzle and help you reach the end goal. So small functions and modularization is very, very helpful when you're thinking from an automation perspective. So think small, write small. Fast feedback loops. This is very interesting and also my interesting area of discussion whenever I chat with people. So how many of you are gamers here? Video games? Wow, interesting. So gamers are also considered as restless people. Sorry, guys, but I'm a gamer myself, and I'm in their shoes as well. The reason to say that is because they spend a lot of time, hell lot of time, choosing a monitor to play with. Agree, for most of you? Because you can't get like probably unresponsive monitor. Like you click a button and it takes 2 minutes to respond, right? So the gamer lose the context error and lose the competition. So fast feedback is like this, right? So whenever you think about continuous delivery, integration, continuous automation, fast feedback comes into picture. So I wanted you to think about that real life analogy of video game. So be a gamer yourself. Think about that, and what happens if you not have that communication quickly when you execute your test. And that's what really happens as well in your development. And that's exactly how much time your test automation should be. For example, in your continuous delivery pipeline, most of you would have a test that automatically runs, so it gives you a fast feedback that validates your developer's code. In a short form, we call it PR validation test, most like a pull request validation test. And I've seen, in my experience, people put the entire regression pack, and it takes 6 hours to run, a day to run, and I've seen extreme cases where it takes 2 days to run as well. There's so much monolith systems out there. So write test that enables fast feedback, and make sure your happy path end-to-end has that quick feedback mechanism. And honestly, I don't care if you really use any models, test pyramid or trophy or diamond. It doesn't make sense because someone has modeled it because they think it's good. It might work for you, it might not work for you. The key goal is, to me, is, well, I've used these models, I'm not abusing them, but what I'm trying to say here is, it depends on context, right? I want you to think from context. So you have a test pyramid model. Okay, let me go and implement this. So your product might not be suited for test pyramid model, right? So I want you to think from that angle and take an action. And the campsite rule, any of you like camping, hiking, adventures? Good. So I'm sure it's a profound principle in campsite rule where after camping you sweep the leaves, always make things better for the next explorer. Similarly, any automation code or any code that you see, always leave the code base in a better state than when you found it. And using test-driven development, it's a big picture. Consider like a jigsaw puzzle where you know what the end state is, and then you work towards either individually or with your teams, having tasks delegated between your teams. Okay, I work on building this castle, you work on building the house, the trees around it, blah, blah, blah. So there's multiple things around it. And the last step of TDD is refactoring. It reduces duplication, and it's very, very important. I have a slide for it. There's a subtle difference between refactoring and rewriting. And I want to quickly jump into test maintenance, where it helps you make your test relevant, because test automation is not just you write once and forget, right? So when we were talking with my mates, and we were discussing about how healthcare is being done at different countries, and we apparently spoke about health insurance and all, and then automation came into picture. Don't ask me how health insurance and automation came. That's what happens when you talk over drinks. So test automation is like a health insurance. It helps you when you're not most sure of, but it's always good to be there. And some of the strategies like version controlling, and I've seen cases where version control would exist. I've seen where a team of 7 automation developers were there, but then only one of them used to check in the code. And I don't want you to show your hands because your managers might be sitting along with you. But I've seen cases where teams have done that, and it's completely bad practice. And CI/CD, it's there. Design patterns and refactoring and dry is definitely there. And I'm going to pick 2 of these strategies which makes more meaningful, which is going to be design patterns. And I'm sure most of you have heard about page object model, yeah, which is quite common. And for God's sake, please move on from page object. It is there. It's helpful. But you should think more and beyond page object model, because as an automation testers, engineers who are striving to be automation engineers, understand how your development code base is built on. They are not using page object pattern, right? Page object pattern helps test automation because it has a certain methodology that it follows. It solves a problem, but it is not a silver bullet solution, right? So understand how your development code is built. Probably they're using a facade design pattern. They're using a factory design pattern. So you can still develop your automation framework using these design patterns. All you just need to know is the programming constructs. How do I design a class? How do I make it interact with others, and all this stuff. And comes to refactoring and don't repeat yourself principle, where you try to reduce duplication, and the subtle difference that I spoke about is the refactor and rewrite. One of the instances where I want to quote is where when AngularJS initially came up, along with Protractor framework came up. I'm sure most of you heard about Protractor framework, yeah? So people started using, Protractor, AngularJS framework, it works. All of a sudden, Protractor, Google team decided, let's not develop or maintain Protractor framework anyway, right? So all of a sudden, we have to rewrite the entire thing. So that's where the rewrite comes into picture, where it should not be confused with the refactor, where rewrite helps you completely change the outdated code based on the modern requirements and technologies. And from a test review perspective, well, this is where things get interesting, where funny question is, what's the metric for code quality measurements? It's about how many W2Fs that you get in a room. So it's more like a red pill or blue pill from the matrix, where you decide which room that you want to go to, right? So if you follow the principles that I'm mentioning from the talk so far, you'd better off be in the first room rather than being in the second room. And honestly, there's no real metric for it. It's just a thing there. And code smells are one thing. Effective comments and documentations are key aspects. And law of Demeter, which is good. And of course, the code review, which itself is an essential process. Again, a quick show of hands. How many of you practice pair programming? Great. OK, for those of you who does pair programming, they do know what happens in the process, the refactor and the rewriting and the code review. It's about aligning your thoughts with the pair and making sure it works. So I'm going to pick the 2 of these, which is a law of Demeter and code smells, which sort of helps you understand. Most of you would have seen this meme, but if I want to put it into the clean coding or software paradigm, this is how we should look at it. Code smells a pattern that suggests something needs to be changed, something not just right. And when you see that, it's your duty to go and fix this up. And the general pattern works it in 3 ways, right? Where I've seen 3 sort of people. When a smell is introduced, a small smell is detected, either you didn't take action, either you discard it because as if you didn't see it, or the other is you go and refactor. And I better be it in the fashion of refactoring it, and that makes it easier. And law of Demeter, to put it in layman terms, this is like what we have been advised from our childhood. Don't talk to strangers. Don't get chocolates from your strangers. It's exactly the same. So only talk to your friends, immediate friends, and don't talk to strangers, right? So for example, to put it in test automation context, it's like the classic example of page object, where you can encapsulate the details of a web page and you present what is only needed, right? And if you're writing a login test case, make sure you have login as a function, and you separate the DOM details, DOM locators into a different class so that it doesn't know the HTML structure of the page, because the page can change anytime. These developers are smart, they don't tell us, and so one of the memes in the earlier talks where you give them on a Friday change and they go and test it. A lot of these things happens, right? So from a test execution perspective, it in itself is a huge topic, and I specialize in this paradigm of running it. So I'm a contributor to Selenium, and I've been using Selenium Grid, and there's a lot of things to talk about it. But I want to quickly share what are things like parallel execution, continuous monitoring, reporting, and logging. Like these are some of the key things to make sure it works. Before I move to the last chapter of my talk, this is one of the key things that I want to leave you with. Avoid cleverness. The cleverest solution to a problem is actually that just works. And I've seen people during these code reviews and sessions with them where they try to prove their coding skills for a particular problem. And if you're that one, please try to change yourself, because it's just not works. And I just want to reiterate, cleverest solution to a problem is actually the simplest one that just works. Now, AI. And I know this is interesting because one of them asked me, you're talking about clean code in the age of AI. You have Copilot that creates a code, beautiful code, and you still need these principles. I said, hell yeah. And I just have a small demo quickly. I'm asking, give me a sample code to test a Google search using Selenium Java. You can see the code where it does things like anyone would do, and you can see try catch from nowhere with some thread out sleep. And do you think it's a good practice? Quick show of hands. Great. So, and then I'm asking now change it, because the way how AI works is it needs more context, it needs more data. So I already gave some clean code principles, and I asked you to refactor, and then it gives me a beautiful code, sort of a beautiful code, where it gives you this is how you could change things and it can work. And in another video when I recorded, I asked AI to rate the code itself. For the first one, it rated 4, and the second one, it rated 8. And again, when I asked it to refactor a particular thing, it rated 9. So it keeps on going. It's an endless loop. Now, if I want to put that construct of test authoring, maintenance, execution, test review in AI's context, these are things that the world is going towards, that you should be there. And I see some questions that often comes up, will AI replace jobs, especially testers? Well, I would say AI will take up jobs of testers who doesn't embrace AI, right? So staying relevant is very, very important. I want you to think from that perspective. And whatever AI, large language models, and I have a talk that talks about using LLMs in your automation that I deliver in other countries. So AI hallucinates a lot, and the human in the loop is very essential. So knowing these principles at a basic is very, very important, and that's where things changes. So together, let's craft a future where the code we write is efficient, because in the world of test craftsmanship, we understand that test code is every bit as good as production code. And one last time, how many of you have seen me here before? Quick show of hands. Cool. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Manoj KUMAR. I lead the quality engineering practice for Cognizant in Australia. I traveled all the way from there. I ran a workshop, and I'm here giving this talk, and I hope it made sense. I'm a huge fan of open source, and I developed Selenium for you. So if you're using Selenium, come talk to me. And I also have various different libraries that I open source myself, and I developed it using Kubernetes, observability, and I like to play basketball, and I love riding bikes. That's about me. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for the presentation. First question. Can clean code practices be applied effectively to test cases written within a testing framework, for example, a robot framework?
Well, yes. Honestly, the long story short is yes. The clean code practices or the fundamental principles that you could use it anywhere, be it the tools that you use are code heavy or low code tools or no code tools. Like robot framework, yeah, it's a bit, again, in robot you have options to use it in code or in keyword fashions. Even if you're going that way, all you just need to understand. For example, the concepts like modularization that I explained, or not just for code, right? It's about how do you devise your pattern so that anyone looking at that component, for them it makes sense. So I hope that answers.
Thank you. Do you prefer Java or Python when using Selenium?
Yeah, I think my personal favorite is Java because I've been, when I started as a tester in my career, I learned Java as a language first. But yeah, it was sad to say, but now Python is taking over because of the emergence of AI and machine learning models. And yeah, I do use both. Depends on the context. As a true consultant, wherever it is needed, I just use it.
All right. Do you use Copilot during coding?
Yeah, if my client pays a license for it, I use it. Because if it's available, just use it, right? And then you should actually know whether it's produced right code or not, and that's why the whole talk is all about. Whether in the age of AI, do we really need to care about clean code or not? Copilot is there. Again, understand all this AI, Copilot thing. They all have been developed with some data, and that data is nothing that we humans produced over the time. So it can make mistakes, it hallucinates, so just use it cautiously.
Thank you. Bless you. Okay. Favorite Linux distro?
Favorite Linux distro? I like Ubuntu quite a lot and Fedora. These both are good. And the reason why I like Ubuntu is because, when was it? 12 years ago when they started, they used to ship a free Ubuntu CDs with some stickers, and I fancy collecting stickers and CDs, of course. So that's my first introduction to Linux, and then Fedora, of course, for professional purposes. I'm sure all of you have heard about Ubuntu and its user-friendliness that it brings to Linux.
Thank you. I think it's, it came in front, super. Where to move from page object model implemented in web and mobile testing frameworks?
Is it where or when? Not quite too sure.
I think you need to translate that question to make sure you can answer it.
Right, okay. I don't know if it's many. Many, if you're here, please talk to me if I'm answering it wrong, but I take it as a question like when would you, like why or when would you move to a page object model when you have a framework that handles both web and mobile? Well, honestly, page object would still work if you're using both web and mobile in that context. The reason for me to provide those different design patterns is because that's not just the only pattern, because what I've seen over the period of my experience is people use page object pattern for the sake of it and put all the DOM locators into one file and they send that we are using page object pattern. That's not just the case. The reason is you could move away from page object when you know what sort of design patterns works for your team, and go in hand, talk to your developers and understand, because that's a way for you to learn as well, right? So it's not that intimidating when you go and chat with your developers.
Okay, I love that Dominic corrected his question. I just love it. Is Selenium capable of testing desktop applications, not just web clients?
Well, it's not a very new question. Most of you would know Selenium is usually for web applications. For any standard HTML, it works. Well, but the larger question for you to understand, or larger thought for you to understand is there's two things, there's Selenium and there is WebDriver, right? So together we call it Selenium WebDriver because WebDriver is a protocol and Selenium is a project that uses the protocol. So there are other projects which uses WebDriver protocol. Like for example, using WebDriver protocol, Microsoft has a framework called WinAppDriver where it will help you automate Windows applications, right? And if you use that, you can automate it. If you're using Selenium, that's different. So understand Selenium is different, Selenium WebDriver is different, and WebDriver is different.
Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Yep.
For what is the Selenium not good, I think, choice?
Not a good choice. It's a tough question. As a true consultant, I would say it depends. And I'll just leave it there.
Let's just say the time is up, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, a big applause for this great gentleman. It's so difficult to start after lunch. Manoj, thank you so much.